My name is Dan Grabois, and this is $2 Broom, and I'm talking today with Michael Lowenstern. Mike, hello.
Hello, how you doing, Dan?
I'm good. You're talking to us from, well, to me and us from Las Vegas.
Yep, I'm out here visiting my 87-year-old mom for the week, and it is a perfect time to sit and talk about $2 brooms.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the fact that we've known each other, I don't know, well over 30 years. We've played together. You're a musician. That's been a big part of your professional experience, but you have a whole other side of you professionally. And that to me is really interesting. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So my wife Catherine, who's known me since I was 16 or 15, she calls it double majoring in life. And I'll say this at the outset. When you're in conservatory, I went to Eastman uh, back in the 80s. I graduated in 89. The idea was you either made it in music or you sold out. And still to this day, though, there's this stigma against doing more than one thing. I guess we're all taught that you can only do one thing well, and you have to focus, or else you'll be a jack of all trades and master of none, or whatever the cliches are that you hear. And I don't believe that. I think that people can be good at, and sometimes really good at, more than one thing. And so I leaned into that. I feel like, and also you can have more than one interest and be good at more than one thing. So that's what I chose to do. I've always enjoyed a lot of different things, and I didn't set out to be a polyglot, but there are a couple things that I've enjoyed doing and I've gotten pretty good at, and one of them is playing bass clarinet, and the other thing is marketing.
Right. So, you went to music school, you played clarinet, presumably you started playing bass clarinet also. When? When did you? I mean, for
I
people who
started
don't
on
know, the
bass.
bass clarinet is like the bigger grandpa clarinet, and clarinetists often play the bass clarinet, right? But they rarely specialize in the bass clarinet.
Right. Well, I say the story I tell is that the bass clarinet kind of chose me. I started on the clarinet that my mother played and my sister played, and damn it, you're going to play it because we're not buying you an instrument that you're just going to quit in 2 years. So it's clarinet or nothing. I played it, and it was this old piece of crap, and they hadn't had it overhauled. It didn't seal, and I could only squeak on the thing. And so for 2 years, I struggled with this wood clarinet. And this in the sixth grade, my band director said, "Well, you're holding the band back. Here's a bass clarinet. You'll do less damage there." And I got a bass clarinet. It's in the sixth grade. So I say that I started on bass clarinet because really I couldn't play that other clarinet. So I really did kind of start on bass clarinet in the sixth grade.
That's unusual, I think.
It is. It is. Though these days it seems like some people choose the bass clarinet to begin with, and so I guess more and more often, bass clarinet's a choice and not a demotion like I had. And but it is more rare. But it's more rare than people choosing clarinet, but it's less rare than it was when I chose the bass clarinet.
Well, I'd venture to guess that people are choosing the bass clarinet first, maybe partly because of you and what you've done, but we'll get to that.
Hmm.
So, you go through conservatory, you graduate from Eastman, and is that when you went to Amsterdam?
It is. Yeah, I had a Fulbright for a year.
Okay, so you told me a great story, which I have passed on to countless students, about the professorless master classes that you and your fellow students held. And I wonder if you can tell that because I think it is so important that we don't only learn by having our teachers pour knowledge into our heads, and there's other ways in which we grow and develop. And your story about those classes is really good.
Yeah, so they were called Houtavond, which is woodwind evening or wind evening, and or wood evening actually, and it was flutes and clarinets and probably bassoons and oboes would get together at the school late at night, certainly after school was out, and in Amsterdam, and we would each get up on the stage in the recital hall and play something, and then everybody would just tear the shit out of you, like tell you. I mean, it was never this sort of like shit sandwich where it's like, oh, that was really good and this was good, but this was bad, but this was really good. No, it was just straight the middle part of the sandwich. And so everybody would just would be critical, but not mean usually. And then we would all go out and get drunk. And that was that. I guess that was the treat at the end, is that everybody would go out and drink and continue talking about stuff like that. But it was a nice way to do it without without having a teacher there to say what was quote right. And I think you're right. I mean, I tell students of mine, you're with your teacher 1 hour a week, maybe 2 hours a week if you're lucky, but you are with your colleagues all of the rest of the time. And so when you pick a school where there are interesting colleagues. A teacher is important, certainly. There's a lot to that. But if you were at a school where the only good teacher is the horn teacher and everybody else blows, you're not going to learn as much.
Right. And
Yeah.
did you hear your colleagues that year just get better and better with incredible speed and because of those evenings?
I think that I don't know if they got better, but they certainly got other input that they didn't get from their teacher, because a lot of those people were not from Holland. There was me, there was somebody from Australia, there were some Dutch people, but it was this kind of global thing as well. So Dutch at the time, Dutch players were, and it was helpful for me as well. They were very accepting of mediocrity. Like if they missed some stuff, they were like, "Yeah, music exists in time, and so I made a few mistakes, and who cares?" And I actually learned a lot from that, because focusing on perfection, which is kind of what a lot of conservatories in the U.S. teach, and certainly in other parts of the world too. It was a really, I was pressing them on mistakes, and they were pressing me on boring. And so I think that for me certainly opened up a whole idea of, it has to be interesting before it's good, or it has to be interesting to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this reminds me a little bit of a story that Arnold Jacob, who was the longtime tuba player for the Chicago Symphony, told that when he went to music school at Curtis, which is a great music school with especially lots of really famous string players going through there and great teachers. And there was one tuba student, and it was him. And so he had his own tuba room, and on either side were famous string players who had their teaching studios. So he went into his room and he was thinking, well, I better sound good because I got famous people who can hear me through the walls. And again, it's not a teacher saying, do this, do this, do this. It's like, I got to raise my own standard because of my circumstances, which it sounds like you guys were also doing with your wood evening. You were raising your standard because of the people who were listening to you and what were they going to hear?
Yeah. I mean, I think to me, it was also really important because in Europe, music was not a competition. It wasn't a sport where there were winners and losers. And in the U.S., a lot of the time, I mean, if you think about it, all of the all-state events that go on and auditions for this, there are it's zero sum. Somebody wins, somebody loses.
And I got
And
first chair, you got second
exactly,
chair.
exactly. So and parents of students, I've found a lot of them are like, well, my student was first chair and the blah blah blah, and they lead with that when I meet them. And honestly, great, but it was really healthy for me to stop thinking of music as a competition, not even a team sport. There's no winning or losing. It's just well, we know this now, but as a kid, it's come out of Interlochen where there were challenges every week and you had to win and you had to beat somebody. It was really healthy for me to get out of that. I think some people never do.
Right. So you finish that year, you finish out your Fulbright, and you come to New York City.
I went to Long Island for 4 years at Stony Brook. Yeah,
Okay, and then you come to New York and you're a freelancer, and that's how we met. And we
that's
ended
right.
up playing in a group for a few years together and doing lots of freelancing together. We're now, I think, in the late 80s, the early 90s,
Early '90s, like
and
'94 is when I arrived.
94.
Yeah, it
And
was when I
there's,
moved to Manhattan,
okay, and
Brooklyn.
so
Yeah.
there's this relatively new thing going on, and they're calling it the World Wide Web. And you somehow have the foresight to think that people might want to have a website.
Yeah, I mean, I've always, so that's part of my double major in my
Yeah.
brain is I've
I'm trying to
always,
figure out how to thread this
oh
needle
well, this,
because
well, I'll
it's
thread
a
it
whole
for you.
tapestry.
I'll thread it for you. So, well, there's internet, but there's also the marketing part of it. The internet is just another medium for marketing. But I'll back up a little bit and say, at Eastman, you did not have to do more than a senior recital, period. And I loved doing recitals um, because I loved making posters, and and that for me was was the creative part of it. Playing the clarinet, fine, yeah, okay, but it was, how do I get people to come to my recital, my bass clarinet or clarinet recital, instead of one of the 15 other things that were happening that night. And so I started to really try to figure out things like, well, where do people have free time to read things like recital programs or posters for that matter, and where do they have the time and nothing else to read? Now these days it's harder because of phones, but back then I was figuring out, like, on the backs of toilet stalls, at urinals, inside the elevator as they closed, on the floor of a certain place, on the floor of the bus shuttle that took us to the dorms. I would be putting them in places where nobody else was posting. And so that's media. That's figuring out, like, where is no one else doing this so that I'm the only thing that they are reading about. And the internet was that too, right? Because in the beginning, people didn't know what they were going to do with it. They didn't know what it was good for. Not everybody had it, so it was kind of, wonky. And there were other avenues that people would do. They would send out postcards, and I'm sure you did, and I know I did. And there was, remember the new music calendar that came out that everybody got once a month, and it had everything on it that everyone who paid for it to be on it. And so, yeah, the internet for me was another way to is another medium. And so I built a website, and I
Let
was
me
trying
just
to.
jump in here for 1 second
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah.
for no, just for people who are maybe under 30 or even 35 that might not know that the iPhone, first smartphone came out in I think 2006,
Seven.
2007, something
Yeah.
like that. And that I think the first time I saw a website was probably 92, 93, something like
You
that.
got there before me. Yeah.
And but it was slow. There was no notion of posting. There weren't chat rooms. None of this stuff existed. Obviously, there's no Facebook. So when you're talking about posting a poster, you're taking a piece of cardstock and posting it. That's why we talk about posting,
Yeah.
making a post online. But that context probably missing for people who are on the younger side, like our children.
Yeah. And it seems sort of like, I mean, I can't imagine an analogous thing in our lifetime. I suppose telephone. I mean, we had phones. I mean, it was that big. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
So that's
so
true.
you're putting up posters, you're posting in unusual places, and you're doing the graphic design.
And the copywriting. Yeah.
Okay. So take us through from there.
Yeah, so I did that, and I was really interested in making, press kits. I did that for a lot of, that's how I made a living for a while, was doing press kits for other groups. I did New Millennium, I did other groups like that. And Ethel, I did their first website. So
Yeah.
stuff like
So
that
contemporary
was
music ensembles with players who you
right,
knew.
who I knew. Exactly. So, I had an in. And so
Yeah, but okay, you had it in, but I mean, business is social, music business is
100%.
social, the business
Yeah.
business is social, and I think we should make note of the fact that you knew some people and you had a service to offer, and those personal contacts are just absolutely crucial.
100%. And I don't know who listens to this podcast, but I gotta say, that's the other thing is, like, and we're going back again, jumping around. I chose to go to Stony Brook not because I wanted to live in Long Island, not because I wanted to study with Charlie Nidick, who I had studied 4 years with at Eastman, but because I wanted to be with people like Tara O'Connor and Todd Reynolds and Tina Dahl, and be with other players like that, because I knew, first of all, these were the people who I respected and I felt like I could learn a lot from. And second of all, these are the people who were going to leave grad school and go into New York, and these would be the people I'd be playing with.
Right. So
And
for
and
those
you
who
know,
don't know, these are people who ended up playing tons of contemporary music in which you have a huge interest, as do I, and who are amazing at their instruments as well.
right? Because if I had moved to New York, I went to school, let's say Cleveland Institute, and I moved to New York, and it is very unlikely I would have met you when I met you because I got that job through somebody that I went to grad school with, and you were in that gig probably because you knew somebody who you were in, so that's how you meet. But it's harder, I think, or at least slower to break in when you don't know people. And so, like, leaving school where you're going to in a city like New York, it's really good to go to school there so that you at least have a network when you graduate, which you did.
Yeah, but that's why my teacher urged me to get a master's at Manhattan School of Music.
Exactly.
He said, "You moved here, you don't know anybody. Go to school, get a 2-year degree, you'll know people." And he was right.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, I didn't know Alan Kay before I got here, famed great clarinet player, Orpheus. I didn't know Joanne Sternberg, another great clarinet player, and Orpheus who teaches at Princeton. So like a lot of those people are, I don't know. I mean, I suppose I would have met them earlier, but yeah.
Hmm.
So anyway, yes, playing in those ensembles, it was a really neat time. I think, certainly for me, and any time in New York when there was still like bang on a can was still sort of subterfuge, and it was anti-establishment then. Now I think it's the establishment, but then it was rebellious and
Yeah.
playing with
So for the people who don't know, Bang on a Can is
sorry,
a ensemble and a music festival of really great musicians
yeah,
who focus
and
on
also
contemporary music.
terrific marketers,
Hmm.
like unbelievably talented marketers. Yeah.
Right.
Anyway,
So
so
when I first met you, I don't think I had any idea that there was another major going on in your lifeline, but you were doing stuff.
I mean, I think we all know that you, you have to live a sort of a composite life when you're a freelancer and you are doing various things. Like some of them are in music, some of them are not in music. For some people, I was temping, um, and I like when I didn't have gigs, I needed to still eat. So I was a Kelly girl, Kelly temp. I was actually one of the few males who was in the Kelly secretarial pool. And I would go and because I quote knew computers, I would somebody would take a vacation for a week and I would go fill in as a secretary, and that's what I did. And in moving the story along in January of 1997, I literally had run out of money. Meanwhile, in December of 1996, my first CD was released. So it was a big, wonderful moment. Spasm comes out, I am on the map, and then January, I have $100 in my account. And so I call Kelly and I say, hey, do you have any gigs for me? And they said, yeah, we're going to send you to this ad agency named Gray. I didn't know Gray. I didn't know, I maybe had heard of Ogilvy, but I didn't know Gray. Gray's pretty big. So I was there for a week doing PowerPoint presentations, and they were all freelancers there. Literally everybody who sat at the computer, it was my computer during the day and it was somebody else's computer at night, and it was a 24-hour operation there of
Hmm.
people literally making junk mail. So I was doing credit card offers for Chase 8 hours a day. And I was, typesetting on the computer. And I did that for a couple of years. And then there was a moment where they're like, hey, we're starting an internet advertising arm. Who wants to learn Flash, which was a program which Steve Jobs, ironically, from our conversation, he killed in 2007 when the iPhone came out. He's like, no Flash is ever going to run on this because it had security threats. But from 1998 or 1999 until then, Flash was the de facto rich media advertising arm. It was anything that animated was Flash. And it was interactive. It was super. So anyway, I raised my hand. I was like, yeah, I'll learn it. Everyone else was like, no, I'm really happy making credit card offers. I was not happy making credit card offers. And so that was my entry into internet advertising. And I was the first at Gray, this enormous, huge company that had been around since the 30s. I was the first person who was doing internet ads at that
Wow.
company. So I started the department.
Where
And
were these ads running? Where online?
Yahoo, AOL.com, like all of these MSN.com. and we were doing
CompuServe, probably.
everywhere. Yeah, so the little slivers or the boxes that you would see animating that everybody hated were mine. Um, but so the first part of it was creative, and it was interesting, just sort of learning how to code that and making it look interesting. But I'll pause there because I could go on forever about my philosophies of marketing and why I thought internet advertising sucked then and is less shitty now. But that was where I got my start. And so I'll say one more thing and then I'll pause. I did that for 8 years and freelanced also. So I would do New Jersey Symphony and I would do this tour, and they would hold my seat. So I could be gone for 6 weeks and come back and start working the next day. It was a perfect, perfect gig for me to be able to travel and still do what I'm doing. And I did that for a long time, for about 8 years.
Do you think you hit a particular historical sweet spot with the
Yes,
ability? Like, it's really hard to imagine now somebody being able to come and go at an advertising agency.
it's incredibly hard now.
Yeah.
Then it was it was just luck. But the other thing is, I said yes when
Right.
they asked. And that's
Right.
the other thing. It's like somebody could, everybody else said no. That was the other option. And I said yes. And I
Yeah.
didn't
Well,
know anything. Yeah,
yes is the magic word for a freelancer of any kind.
yes, it is. And, the two things can happen if you say yes. Well, definitely one thing will happen if you say no is they'll never ask you again. Two things can happen if you say yes, which is that you do well and they ask you again, or you do terribly and they don't ask you again.
Right.
But, one way you have a positive outcome and the other way you don't.
Yeah, a third of that pie is a really good third.
Yeah.
You have a third, you can look at it, you have a 1 in 3 chance. Either you'll do great, that's your good third, you'll do badly or you won't do it.
Yep.
1 in 3 chance isn't bad for
Yeah, and
success.
if you choose the yes, it's a 1 in 2 chance. But my mom always would say, she's like, if you can't trust yourself to figure it out, then who can you trust?
Right.
Anyway.
So were you practicing bass clarinet at this time as
Oh
well?
yeah.
You were able to maintain
Oh yeah.
and
I
grow?
was doing. I was living two full lives. One was from 9 to 5, and the other one was every other time. And like I said, the 9 to 5 would let me leave.
Hmm.
Also, something I cannot imagine in this day and age.
Right. So we played together in the Curiously Strong Winds, which lasted a couple of years. And I can't, do you remember when that was?
Yeah, it was right around the time Ariel was born, so it was probably 98 to 2001 or two.
Right. I remember you putting her on the little seat that bounced electronically, and you said, "Don't worry, she's not going to wake up from this thing."
That's right.
Yep. Um, and we were playing woodwind quintet, so you were playing the clarinet, the regular B flat clarinet.
Mhm.
And it seems, if my memory is correct, that it wasn't that long afterwards that you decided you're a bass clarinetist.
Oh, I was always a bass clarinetist.
Right, but I mean that you didn't want to play. I remember
Oh,
seeing you
it
at one
wasn't
point. You're
long
like,
after
I don't
that
want to
that
play the clarinet anymore.
that's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, 2005, I joke, I say I ran away and joined the office. That was when that summer of 2005, I basically quit everything. I quit New Jersey Symphony. I quit the klezmatics. I quit all the chamber music stuff I was doing. I quit everything because I took a full-time job in advertising.
Okay, so let's just go back and talk about the klezmatics because, of course, I have a huge interest in klezmer.
Hmm.
So you went on tour with the klezmatics quite a bit, right?
Yeah, I got that job. It was another hand raise moment where Frank London called me and he said, Dave Krakauer isn't playing with us anymore. Do you play klezmer? And I said, yes. And I had never done it. And he's like, great, gigs in 2 weeks. Listen to all of our albums. See you then. And click. And I was like, oh shit. So my first call was to Krakauer.
Hmm.
And I'm like, all right, so first of all, what did I just get myself into? And he had a lot to say. And the
So
second thing was,
David Krakauer, amazing klezmer clarinetist,
and
now
he was the
works,
clarinetist in the Klezmatics. He was
right, and
one of the founding members.
yeah, and he now works with his own bands, and we've had him here playing at our klezmer festival, and
Right. I mean,
wonderful
he's a
guy.
real superstar, and he's
Yeah.
had a remarkable solo career as a klezmer artist as well. Anyway, so I took a few lessons with him, and he's like, "Are you circumcised?" I'm like, "Yeah," and he goes, "You'll be fine." And it was fine, but they wanted someone who played saxophone more too, and who was 100% in the klezmer scene. And I was still freelancing. I was still doing all this other stuff. And Frank London would make fun of me for not being able to do a gig because I had a week with New Jersey Symphony
Mm.
and stuff like that. So eventually, yeah, I just quit everything. And as soon as I quit, within 2 weeks, any hole that I left in the music freelance world shrunk into nothing, and the phone stopped ringing.
Wow, because you started saying no.
I only had to say no once.
Yep.
That's another story. I mean, but yeah, I it was really the best move because I there's a lot of reasons. I'm curious if I can ask you, like, you didn't go the orchestra route,
Right.
and you had a very successful, uh, quintet. I mean, really success by the standards that I hold. You were in the stratosphere of success with that quintet. It may not have felt like that on the inside, but it felt like that from looking at you guys. But you still freelanced and all that stuff. But you, from my knowledge, did you ever take an orchestra audition?
I did take some orchestra auditions.
How were those?
They sucked.
Why?
Yeah, that was, well, because that kind of stuff that you do in an orchestra audition is not what I do.
And
Playing
what is
things the
that stuff
same a
that you?
bunch of times in a, sorry, what?
I'm sorry. What is the stuff that is an orchestra
You
audition?
know, playing absolutely note accurate over and over again the same way, that kind of thing. I mean, with my group, Meridian Arts Ensemble, it's the group you're talking about, we were all about exploring, and it was like the Starship Enterprise. We were going to strange new worlds that no one had been to before, and I'd be like, but there's an opening in the Cleveland Orchestra, and it's a steady salary, and that seemed cool, and orchestra music is great. Um, but I did pretty badly in most auditions, and it just didn't I don't feel like the kind of player I was the kind of player that was going to win those jobs. And looking back at it now, I'm sort of proud of being the kind of player that didn't win those jobs. And I ended up with a career about which I have no regrets, that went really well, and which is ongoing. So yeah, I agree with what you said earlier in our chat about that part of the music business, which is really about making the free throw every time and not about your artistry on the court.
And that was what ultimately made me decide to abandon that goal. Because, when you leave, at least when I left conservatory, Eastman, I, that was the goal. Um, we, it, the holidays every year, I would bring a video camera home because I was the AV guy at Eastman. I'd bring a video camera home and we would all say what we were going to do in 10 years on the video. And every year we would do that. And every single year I'm going to play the bass clarinet in this symphony. I'm going to play principal clarinet in the blah, blah, blah. That was my goal because that was what was our destiny coming out of conservatory. At least that's what I expected, that it was either that or you taught. And so I felt like giving up on that was giving up on my parents' investment. It was giving up on my teachers who had put this what I thought was like that was my goal. I was letting people down, but I think ultimately, yeah, it was I wasn't getting it. Either literally, I wasn't getting jobs, or figuratively, I wasn't understanding what it took to get jobs. And the other thing that I noticed is just like everybody who had those jobs was mad all the time.
Yeah.
And
Well,
they,
you know the joke. Yeah.
you should say it.
How do you make a musician complain? Yeah, give him a
Give them a
job.
job.
All right. How do you make him complain harder? Give him a better job.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of it. And the other thing I noticed is that I was doing the freelance gigs and I was sitting next to people who were 30 years older than me on the same gig. And I was just like, that's going to be me.
I had that same experience, which was one of the reasons I eventually left New York.
I just, yeah. So yeah, I bailed. But 2005, which happens to be the year I bailed, also happens to be the year that YouTube was founded,
Mm.
you know? And I had been in this world of internet marketing for that long. And by the way, yeah, I mean, I took a full time job. And so that became my main uh, major, if you want to call it a double major. And my minor was in bass clarinet, but I was super fascinated by what YouTube could be. Nobody, like the internet, really not 10 years before, nobody knew what to do with the internet. Nobody knew what to do with YouTube. And I was not getting teaching jobs. I had tried for teaching jobs. Nobody was interested in me for teaching because I'm not a clarinet player as far as they're concerned because I have this bigger one. And so nobody wanted me for anything. So I was just like, I think this is a really great, because people were putting out concerts, expecting people were going to sit and watch a concert on YouTube. And I was like, this is an education uh, channel. And I wanted to be the Mr. Rogers of that education channel for the clarinet.
Is that when you started ear spasm?
I did. I started back then, but when YouTube was owned independently for a while and then Google bought them, and all of the old videos got wiped. So some of the more famous ones, like the very first video and all that stuff, those got put back on, but mine were gone and I
Mm.
hadn't saved them. So in 2009 is sort of when my channel started to have content again. But yeah, I started making tutorials. Yeah. And that gave me everything that I didn't have in as a performer, as a freelancer. I got everything that I didn't get from. I mean, I think the only thing I didn't get was money, but I got all of the bully pulpit and the notoriety and the feedback and all of that stuff came because of YouTube. And back then, we used to make fun of it, saying that like, oh yeah, I'm internet famous. You know, these days that's what being famous is.
Right, right.
So it's kind of
So I'll link to your YouTube channel in the notes for our YouTube post of this conversation. So what kind of stuff were you teaching on your instructional videos?
I had a student back then who would come to my house, and like we were always taught by our teachers, I want you to go in, I want you to listen to someone play this, good recording of this. Just a way to get it in your ear. And she would go to YouTube and listen to other high schoolers play it. And I would come, and she'd come back, and she'd sound like other high schoolers. In other words, not great. And I would ask her, I'm like, well, did you go listen? She's like, yeah, I listened on YouTube. So I started actually, as soon as she left, I would record it on YouTube. And because I knew how the algorithm worked, I was able to do so. As soon as she started typing it, I was the one that came up first. And the first videos, which I've also taken down because it'll be obvious, and I'll be like, hi, Jamie, I told you not to watch YouTube, but since you're here, here we go. And I was noticing that other people were watching them too. And then I realized, okay, so this is the new idea. Start making stuff for people who live in this big country who have no access to bass clarinet teaching.
So making stuff is a good description of your all strands of your career because you make your own CDs,
Mm-hmm.
recordings, now probably not CD,
Not anymore now.
but recordings. You make your own videos, you made your own ads, you made other people's ads, you made stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's the ADD part of me. I have to be doing something.
Well, the energy part of you, let's put it that way.
Okay, I think of ADD as a superpower, frankly.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of my favorite of your videos is your clarinet take on the Jetsons theme song, which I will also link to in the notes because it's fantastic.
Thank you.
But so you and your family kind of act out the Jetsons opening sequence,
Mm-hmm.
title sequence,
Right.
with some of the actual Jetsons footage. And then you play the whole thing multi-tracked on the clarinet and bass clarinet.
Right. Yep.
So, I mean, the bucket of skills involved here First of all, just playing those instruments, and it's a lot of notes. For
Right.
those of you who remember the Jetsons, it is not a simple theme song, but then coming up with the kind of script, how you were going to act out certain parts of it, how you were going to video it, then splicing together the video, combining it with the audio. I mean, it's really quite a feat, and people should watch it. And I assume you get just mountains of hits from these things.
I don't actually. I've had a few that have quote broken out, but I cannot seem to make lightning strike in the same place twice. And I've talked to other people who do YouTube videos who've had a hit and maybe have had less successful hits, but another hit. And that's kind of par for the course. You know, you got a few things that people have seen, and then you got a whole lot that no one's seen. And I still
Right.
make them, but it's hard knowing after, now it's been, God, 18 years I've been doing this. Um, it's hard knowing that you're going to put in all this effort and 3,000 people are going to watch it. But you do it
3,000 is
anyway.
pretty good, though. See, that shows
I
where your
guess.
standard is now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, 3,000, I mean, I guess exactly. It's all relative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, once we post this conversation up online,
It's going to be huge. Huge.
huge.
Yeah. But, a good video of mine is, if I'm lucky, like 30,000. And the best video is like 1.5 million. Just one.
That's really pretty amazing because you're a bass clarinet player
I know.
who's getting a
It's weird.
million and a half people to watch you. I mean that if you put some naive ears on, that's pretty amazing.
I have to look at it that way. And God, I'm proud of it. And I don't take it for granted. But yeah, YouTube is a great channel. But like anything, now there are a lot of other channels. People have asked me why I didn't do Snapchat or why I didn't do TikTok or why I didn't do whatever the thing is. And I just, I realized that I could be chasing the next thing. But those people who invested a lot of time in Snapchat probably regret it now.
Right. Yep. So, like me, you've now retired from your day job.
Yes.
And like me, you are not idle. Tell
That's
us what
right.
you're doing now.
I own a clarinet and bass clarinet boutique in the ground level of my house called Earspasm, which has been my brand forever. Um,
Hmm.
and it really kind of took off during COVID when everyone was home all the time, and I was getting phone calls from people saying, "Hey, I am a fill in the blank. I am a billionaire lawyer, whatever it is." And I used to play clarinet in high school, and I want to go back to it. Now I have the time to do it. And I was sending them to all these other shops. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Like, here's what you should buy, and you should go buy it there. And I was like, wait a minute, I should be doing this. And so I started the business and started to fill that need myself. And
So,
yeah.
how do you do that? Do you buy a bunch of clarinets and bass clarinets and stick them in the basement and put up a shingle, or
Well, I mean, I guess that's the simplified way to look at it. Yeah, I buy them and I sell them like any other middleman. But
hopefully
I
you
have
sell them for more than you buy them for?
exactly, and that's how that's how it works. But we again, I'm not the first person to do this. I was probably the first person to just do bass clarinet, but that didn't last too long. I mean, that's a narrow market, but it's a good one, and it was mine. No one else was doing it. And so I started selling a lot of bass clarinets, and then of course clarinets make sense. But we carry the weird stuff that no one else does. So we have a lot of instruments in the shop that have birthdays in the shop,
Hmm.
and I'm not really worried about moving. There's an instrument that I had for 2 years just sold on Saturday. And you never know. And so just having them, my dad, who was also a salesman his whole life, he's like, if you don't have it, you can't sell it. So you should get it, and that's what we do. So I travel around. I go to Germany 4 times a year to pick out instruments and stuff like that.
So, do you try every instrument that you're going to sell?
I do, I do, but I more than that, I know that every instrument that comes out of the factory has problems. And I don't know if it's like that with horn or any other, but with clarinets, these days, of course, they're all made by CNC machines, and so there's a lot of perfection in there. But the age of the drill bit matters, And
And the
you know,
wood matters.
yeah, so we'll get instruments that, like, when you pull off the keys and you see the tone holes, they look like the surface of Mars. And so I have hired two techs. I do not do tech work. I know my limitations, and I have two techs that I pay out of pocket, sometimes a lot of money, to make these instruments great. And so we that's part of the benefit of buying, let's say, from Earspasm rather than from a big box like Music and Arts, is they get the instruments and they put them through an inspection maybe, but they don't really they don't sit there and, I guess, resurface tone holes on a
Hmm.
brand new clarinet. So that's what our bonus is, and it's an interesting challenge. It's an
That's
interesting
great.
challenge. Yeah.
Before we wrap things up, I definitely would like to talk about your recording 10 Children because there was a period in our lives here where we just wore the numbers off of the CD, listening to it so many times. And it's fantastic. You're a great composer and arranger for yourself. And
That means a
that,
lot coming from you, Dan. I have huge amount of respect for your work. When we were doing the quintet, especially, that was just. But yeah, holy shit.
well, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm in
Um,
your fan club too.
Thank you. Um, but there's a great backstory to your
Hmm.
collaboration with your, at the time, extremely young daughter on that. I think it makes a really nice story. So would you mind telling it?
Of course. So I had, the studio was basically in our house.
Your
Um,
recording studio.
yeah, this recording studio, the place where I would work and write, was all in the house. And of course, my daughter is in the house, and I would be working. And one day I was working. I don't know. I was trying to come up with something to do. It was a third record um, that I wanted to put out, and she's about 3, and she said, "Dad." She was in the studio. She said, "Dad." I said, "Yes." She says, "Do you know? Could you write something that I would like?" And I took that from, like, from the mouths of babes, the truth comes. And I said, "Sure, let's see. I'll tell you what. I will write stuff, and if you like it, I'll let other people hear it. And if you don't like it, I won't let anybody else hear it." And she said, "Great," and she left. And at the time, I was listening to a lot of Chick Corea's children's songs.
Hmm.
It's a great, great album of these brief, challenging pieces, musically interesting pieces that are intended for children. And she was
Hmm.
listening to them every single night before she would go to bed. We would rock her and we'd listen to that album every single night. And I love the idea of, the 1.5, 2, 3 minute max tune. And
Hmm.
so I started writing these. And then the other part of the story, after I got going, was that because I was a stay-at-home dad, uh, a lot of the time I was the de facto, um, I guess, childcare for a lot of the people in that building. And they would, so we would, especially on weekends. So I would have, 4, 5, 6 kids in the house at the same time, and I was getting to know them, and so I used them as inspiration for a lot of these tunes, like the kid who would spin and spin and spin and spin and spin until he got dizzy and hit the side of the coffee table. I had a piece that's specifically like that, and so I was using them as inspiration, and I released that in 2003. And then 10 years, 20 years later, all these kids are graduating and it's COVID, nearly 20 years later, and I write a second set. And the second set is me finding them on wherever they are on Instagram, and reaching out and getting to know them a little bit, and writing a follow-up.
Nice.
Yeah.
So did you get any thumbs downs when you would present your daughter with
Yes, I
with
got. I think I wrote about 15, and she nixed 5 of them. So 10 children sounded like a nice round number. It was a catchy name, and that's what we went with. Yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. Yeah, and though admittedly, I have turned a couple of them into other pieces.
Well, one does that, and a lot of famous composers did that, and so I certainly, I mean, I wrote a horn etude which turned into a wacky song on one of my CDs, and I never looked back.
Yeah, I mean, Ariel, I think she forgave me.
Do you have any advice you would give to musicians who are, say, in music school right now and thinking about
Absolutely.
careers?
I've got a ton of it. Um, don't be afraid. Okay, I don't know how it is nowadays, and maybe you can tell me, Dan, because you've been in it. But like I said earlier, the vibe is you either make it in music or you're a failure. In other words, you make your living in music or you're a failure. And a lot of people will take really not great gigs so that they're fulfilling their destiny as musicians in order to do that. I don't know if it's still that way, but if it is, I am here to say that you do not need to fill your refrigerator with food from the money you make from music to be a musician at the highest caliber, to be able to contribute to music and leave music in a better place that you found it. That's our job, is to leave it in a better place that we find it. I think that there are a lot of people who are making music who are takers, and I'm not going to name any names, but I know that probably we all know people who are milking as much as they can out of it, but not leaving a whole lot in their wake. And I feel like the opposite is our responsibility, and that's what we have to leave more than we've taken. So do that, and you don't have to make a living doing that to do that. If I'm an example, at least, you don't have to make a living at music to do that.
I've certainly used your story as an example with lots of my students, and I think it's eye-opening because we are taught like this is an all-consuming passion and it must be. And if it's you can't imagine doing anything else, that's when you do music. And if you can imagine doing something else, get out of music. And I think your words are a lot smarter than that because you can do more than one thing and you can do more than one thing well. You said that right at the beginning of our conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And you can make your own options in life, which we both did.
That's right. And I think that the happiest musicians, and I think you're one, are people who did that. And I think some probably of the less happy musicians are people who feel stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard in the field of classical music to keep the ball rolling because by definition it's classicalized. It's a ball that's not rolling anymore. And what we were talking about with orchestra auditions, I think that orchestras are not looking for interpreters who kind of revolutionized the interpretation of Brahms' First Symphony or Beethoven's Third or whatever. It's a preservation kind of a thing, and a nice career would involve doing some of that because that music is great, and then also doing some of the more revolutionary, for lack of a better word, stuff that moves the music project ahead.
Yeah, I think that it's important for schools also to recognize that you need to graduate people who can do both.
Yes,
You can't just get crank people out. I mean, music school is it's trade school for orchestra,
right.
and the problem is it's also like going to trade school to fix carburetors. That's wonderful to be able to do, but no cars have carburetors anymore.
Right.
So I just teachers also, and you did it, and a lot of them do now, and I'm really really happy that there aren't people who are like this is the only way and you will do it this way and you'll get an orchestra job and you'll be happy. So I think the
Well,
world is
it's
changing.
it's interesting because there was this kind of golden era in the 70s in Boston where there was the third stream program at New England Conservatory. And you mentioned Frank London earlier, who plays trumpet and keyboards in the Klezmatics, and he went through that program, and a lot of people that we know went through that program, and it refocused their sights
Hmm.
on exactly what you're talking about, on moving the project forward. And then that program, I don't know what happened to it, but it isn't there anymore, as far as I know. I think Boston Conservatory is now carrying on some of that tradition.
In Manhattan School, when we did the CCP, that was the idea
Yes,
behind that.
yes, the Contemporary Performance Program, which we were
Exactly.
both working in, which was just looking to develop people's musical ideals so they could go out and do something. And those graduates from that program, and many of them have done that. And a string quartet of students that I put together for that is still out there performing with a big career. And
Some of the first
yeah,
graduates of that, you hear about all of them, like Andy Akio. He just won what his next Oscar or something like that, or his other Grammy. I'm so proud of those people.
yeah, it's really amazing. We
Yeah,
were fortunate to work in that environment.
it was a great time.
And the
So
school was forward looking to okay the plan by our colleague Patty Monson, who
yeah,
planned
she
out
did a
the whole
remarkable. I mean,
thing.
Patty, I hope you're listening because no one else could have done that.
Yep. Thank you so much for talking to me.
It's a pleasure always to see you, even remotely. And
Yes.
yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for asking.